Hey guys, this video is going to go on our shortest playlist. Our shortest playlist is our learning Japanese playlist because we believe it's better to learn Japanese from Japanese people rather than learn it secondhand from people who are not Japanese. So that's why that playlist has never really had much on it. And this one isn't terribly educational either. It's sort of an overview, and it's probably more relevant to our How to Do Stuff in Japan playlist and a Raising Kids in Japan mini playlist or something, or just maybe it's just going to be mildly interesting to one person. Who knows? We shall see. So what set this video off is there are some little people in our family who are trying to learn kanji. They've already learned hiragana and katakana, and they're trying to learn kanji, and they've started to learn romaji in school, and they're all thoroughly confused. So those of you who don't know about all these things, just a little bit of an overview, a rough overview. So hiragana is a basic alphabet that's used in Japan, that can be used in Japan to write any Japanese word. It's comprised of 48 characters. Is it 48? 48 characters. That's why we don't teach Japanese. And it's basically 5 vowel sounds, 1 N sound, and then a whole bunch of syllables. And there's 48 of them. So they go a, I, u, e, o, na, kaki, kuke, ko, nani, nune, no, sashi, suse, so, and off they go. And so it can be used to write any Japanese word. And then what they did is they developed katakana, which is exactly the same sounds, 48 of exactly the same sounds. So a, u, e, o, nani, nune, no, sase, sa, kaki, kuke, ko, nani, nune, no, sashi, suse, so, and all those, right? Another 48. So they've got their 48 hiragana that they can use to write any Japanese word. And then they've got their 48 katakana that was specifically designed to use for foreign words. For some strange reason, they didn't want to use their hiragana to write foreign words, so they made another alphabet, 48 characters, just to write foreign words with. Really ineffectively, by the way. We've spoken about this before. Most foreign languages can't really be written properly in katakana because you haven't got the right sounds. You know, that you've only got 5 vowel sounds, and then after that it's all syllables, which means that most words can't be written properly. And we've talked about this before. You know, most foreigners who come to Japan end up with getting new names, basically because their name that they had from their own country usually can't be pronounced properly in Japan because it's written with katakana. And it's one of the reasons why we get asked all the time, why are the English levels in Japan so low? You know, the Japanese government talk about improving the quality of the English in Japan, but they always fail at it. And year after year, when the tests are given to people around the world to compare countries' English abilities, Japan's always really, really down the list. And sometimes people ask, you know, why is that? Well, there's a number of reasons. One is katakana, because it messes them up. It messes them up, you know, and that's why you've got English teachers you've got Japanese people who teach English in Japan whose pronunciation is shocking, you know. So you get, you know, simple, let's just say stop and start. So you get su, do, pu, you know, because you can't write stop in katakana. So you get this su, to, pu, su, da, do, right? You get a lot of that. And then you can see a sign in front of us there that says Sugi drug, right? So then what you get is the Romanji thing, where they use Roman writing to write Japanese words and or foreign words. So sometimes people watching a video say, oh, I'm surprised how much English that we see. Like we did a video once in a shopping centre, and lots of people commented, oh wow, there's a lot of English in that shopping centre. And sometimes it is English, but sometimes it's not. So for example, that sign back there said Sugi drug. So drug is is used in Japan, the same as the English word, but Sugi is the name of the company, so it's not an English word really. So romaji, Roman writing, gets used to write Japanese words and write foreign words sometimes. But then the pronunciation usually ends up being katakana, right? Now this is going to get confusing because it is. And that's what set this video off, was that we were having a bit of a discussion. The family are sitting around a table here with the in-laws, and the kids, a couple of the cousins were confused because they've been trying to learn Romanji and they're really confused by it. And they've been trying to learn a little bit of English too, and that's really different. So basically what it is the Roman writing is used to write Japanese words. And of course the Roman writing is also used to write English words. However, the pronunciation is different, right? So imagine how confusing this is for kids, right? They've had to learn 48 hiragana words, they've had to learn characters, they've had to learn 48 katakana characters, and then they start to learn kanji, and it's something like, by the time they finish high school, they've learned 5,000 kanji, something like that. It's ridiculous, right? It's absolutely ridiculous. When you consider, a couple of things to consider. One is that you can write all Japanese words in hiragana anyway. So you could have one alphabet of 48 characters, and that's all they really need. But they've stuck to the old kanji system, so they've got to learn about 5,000 kanji, but they still have to use the hiragana as well. Quite often they'll have kanji written with hiragana subtext for people who don't know the kanji. And you see that all the time. You see that on TV sometimes. They put across the screen some kanji, and then just for the people who don't know that kanji, underneath the kanji they have the hiragana written. So you've got Japanese written with Japanese subtitles, basically. And then when you get to this romaji thing, so we'll call the Roman writing that they use for Japanese words, we'll call that romaji, right? Because that's what Japanese people call it. And we'll call the Roman writing that we use to write English Roman writing, okay? Just to sort of make it slightly less confusing. So they teach them romaji in school, and they teach them to write Japanese words with romaji, right? And then they use Japanese pronunciation. So for a couple of examples, the romaji letter I that we pronounce either I as in ice cream or it as in insect, right? They pronounce it E, right? So when they want to write an E sound, they use an I, right? Then the E sound that they use is an E. So when they want A, like sensei, they use the E and the I. So E and I together is pronounced A, right? So you get a Japanese kid who's trying to learn how to write cake in English, and he's been taught in Japanese, I, like aikido, or I shiteru, which means love, I, right? A, right? Is EI. So when they try and write cake in English, they write K. They usually try K first, and then C, and then EI, right? Because as far as they're concerned, that's A, K, right? It's just a mess. And then so they've got their I, U, E, O. So I, U, E, O. So they use A, right? So, but in English is umbrella, which is U, right? So they use A to write what we use for U, and they use EI to write A, and they use I to write E, right? And so they teach the kids this. And the kids usually learn this at school. They've learned their hiragana, their katakana, they've started to learn kanji, then they're taught romanji, right? And so they're learning all this stuff, right? That you know, I is pronounced E, and EI is pronounced A, and A is pronounced U, right? And then somewhere along the line, usually about grade 5 or 6, so usually they're about 11 years old, they start to get taught English, right? Sort of thing. And they get really confused. What do you think that is? You know? And they can't spell anything, they don't know how to spell anything, and they get really frustrated, and it's terrible. You know, and because nobody really explains it to them. That's the other thing that seems to be really lacking in the Japanese education system. Again, just we know some people don't like any video that sounds critical, right? We know, we always get thumb down on videos that sound critical, right? These are just observations. And those guys, we've got some viewers that live in Japan who have similar experiences to what we're talking about on a daily basis. Those guys know what we're talking about. People who've visited Japan before know what we're talking about. These are just observations. They're just facts, right? They're just facts. We're not suggesting they change anything, because they're not going to anyway, whether we suggest it or not. This is probably going to be the way it's going to be in Japan for a really long time. We know that. But we're just telling you, because, people who visit Japan might experience this. People who come to Japan and have kids and have their kids go to school in Japan are going to experience this. And then there's other people that just might be interested, because this helps explain a lot of stuff, right? It explains the terrible pronunciation that we hear all the time. The combination, probably the katakana, is one of the biggest problems when it comes to pronunciation. And we've shown you that before. They actually write in the high school textbooks. They actually write the Japanese word for whatever the thing is. Kuruma is for car, and then next to that they'll write. Oh, it's a bad example, because that katakana actually works. Stop, okay? Yumeru in Japanese, and then next to that they'll write stop in English, S-T-O-P, in romaji, and then next to that they'll write stop in katakana to teach the kids how to pronounce it, right? So the kids are learning, and we've heard it. We've got a friend that owns a juku, and we go and visit him now and again, and you'll hear them in the next room, and they'll have these university students in there that are the teacher, right? The English teacher is a 20-year-old university student. Hey, see the police car hiding behind the building over there to the left, the little police car? We're sitting at a stop sign now. We're totally stopped. Now we're going to go. You should have been happy with that. That was a pretty thorough stop. Yeah, we go visit our friend at his juku sometimes, and in the next room they have an English class with a 20-year-old university teacher, a university student teaching English, and that's what you hear going on in there. And this terrible pronunciation, and it's katakana basically. It's katakana. Occasionally it works. I was going to use kuruma. I was going to use car as an example. In that case, it does sort of work, because ka is Japanese, and you can put a little line on it and extend it and make car. So it sort of works in katakana. There's some words that do. Tomato, potato. You can do that in katakana. That works reasonably well. But everything else is terrible. Most people's names, you have to be lucky to be a foreigner and come to Japan and get to keep your name. You do keep your name, but it's just the pronunciation of it's usually terrible. You usually don't recognize yourself when they talk to you, because you don't recognize your name, because the pronunciation's all katakanaized. And this is really the problem. People ask all the time, why can't Japanese people speak English? It's not really their fault. It's not really their fault. It's the system. I mean, these guys study, the students, the high school students in our family and our neighbours and so on, and the university students that we know, they study and work, and, they go hard, but the system's terrible. The system, the education system's terrible. Just touched on it a moment ago about the explanations. They don't explain this stuff. They just give them this stuff and tell them to go and learn it, basically. I mean, they sort of explain it, but, these kids today, we're having a bit of a barbecue today with the in-laws and with, cousins and all these guys sitting around, and they're asking me about the romaji. And I said, I had to explain to them, no, look, that's not English, sorry. They're asking me because they thought I could explain why. And I sort of could, because I do understand the difference between the romaji and the English, But that's I explained to them basically what I'm saying to you guys, that the difference in the way romaji is pronounced and the way Roman writing is pronounced in English, what we say in English, and the differences. And I was explaining that to them, and that's why it's confusing. And nobody's explained that to them. Their teachers don't explain that to them. The Japanese way of learning, we've actually heard teachers say the word input before. Inputto. And they talk about inputting information into kids. And it is often the way they see it, is that it's like inputting is the way they see it. And they don't explain this stuff. They just input it, and it's really hard. We've got, you know, young guys in our family that are struggling to get, you know, learn all the kanji, and you know, it does seem like a massive waste of time. As a little bit of a side note, the 26 characters that we use in Roman writing can be used to write all the Japanese words quite easily, because they've got a, u, e, o, and then all their and then all their syllables, right? The kaki, kuke, go, sashi, susu, so, nani, nu, and they've got all that, and so it's easy to write Japanese words using Roman writing. So you could replace all the Japanese, you know, the thousands of kanji and the 48 hiragana and the 48 katakana. You could replace all that with 26 Roman letters. And one of the reasons we're asking today, we were sitting there, was like, what's the point? What's the point of this learning Roman writing for Japanese words? Because you've already got 3 alphabets to write your Japanese words with. Why do you need to learn how to write Japanese words in Roman writing? And of course it's the computers and smartphones, because quite often that's how they do it. They don't have a keyboard with 48 characters. Usually what they do is they'll write, if they want to write katana, they'll write K-A-T-A-N-A, and the preemptive text offers them the ka in the hiragana, and then the ta in the hiragana, and the na in the hiragana. And then if they write a word like that, usually what it offers them then is the kanji. It pops up with the kanji and says, do you want this kanji or this one? If there's 2 that are similar, do you want this one or this one? So that's what they use the Roman writing for, you know. But it's just it seems like a mess. It really, really does. And you can see why it gets so confusing for them after they've been doing all this. You know, then when they're already 11 years old, then the learning English starts. And those of you who are watching this, who grew up with English as a second language, you know, some of our friends who live in Europe, who English is their second language, but they speak English better than I do. You know, you guys would know that this isn't the way to learn English, is it? You know, the people who are good at English, in those international tests that they do to grade all the different countries in their English abilities, you know, the countries that score really well are those countries where kids grow up with English as a communication tool. You know, not something that you're given to memorize, which is the way it's done here, which is sort of impossible. You know, they really do. They give lists of words with the Japanese meaning and then the katakana pronunciation, and they just give lists of words like that to the kids and say, go memorize these, which, you know, that's learning a whole language like that, sort of pretty impractical, isn't it, you know? And then they come away with that katakana pronunciation, you know, which is sort of tragic, isn't it? So, yeah, look, it's really just there's nothing we can do about it. It's just the way it is. So, you know, the reason for the video was just because, you know, we were talking about it 2 hours ago. We were sitting around talking about this 2 hours ago, and I was like, yeah, I've got to make a video about this because I haven't talked about the romaji thing. Probably might have touched on it on a previous video, but not the amount of not the explanation that was required. So yeah, you'll find it confusing, and it also means then too, all this means that is when you come to Japan, if you do try and pronounce a word that's an English word or a German word or a French word or wherever else it is that you see written here in Roman writing, there's a good chance that Japanese people won't recognize it. Nissan, right? It's not Nissan. It's not Nissan. It's Nissan, because the I is pronounced E, isn't it? Dominos. Pija. Pija. There's no Z in Japanese. Well, not really. Za. Yeah, there's a za. They could get that one. Yeah, it's a mess. Anyway, but that was that. It was just more of a matter of interest than anything else. It sort of touches on all those topics that we get now and again. You know, the one about why is the English level in Japan so bad, the pronunciation thing, the confusion thing about writing in English, and you know you will experience it. And good luck if you're trying to raise kids in Japan, because geez, it's a thing. Geez, it's a thing, learning all that stuff and then trying to differentiate. Oh no, look, if you're using Roman writing to write Japanese, the pronunciation's this. And if you're using Roman writing to write English words, the pronunciation's this. No wonder they're confused. You can see why, can't you? Anyway, squeeze in this little spot here without hitting that car or that post. That'd be a video, wouldn't it? Did it? There it was. Check out the Learning Japanese in Japan. I think the last video on that would have been probably 8 years ago or something. Haven't even looked at that playlist for a long time. And that in that video, it was recommended if you want to learn Japanese, find yourself a Japanese person to teach you. Actually, just while we're on that, that's the other reason for why the English level is so weak in Japan. As touched on there, the person who teaches English in that juku is a 20-year-old Japanese university student. You know, and that's the other thing, is that you've got these sensei teaching English whose pronunciation is shocking. And usually their English ability is shocking as well. Actually, I was sitting there talking to my friend there one day at the entrance to that juku, and a lady walked in, a young lady walked in, and she's an English teacher at the juku. And he said to me, oh, she's an English teacher. And I said, oh, hello, how are you? And she said, I'm fine, thank you, and you? Those of you who haven't seen that video, check that out, that's a funny video. And then she said, actually, I'll find that, I'll dig that video out, and then I'll put it somewhere where you guys can see it again. That was a funny video. It was in the interviews, I think. And so, I'm fine, thank you, and you? And I said, good, thanks. What did you do on the weekend? And she stood there and she went, nandake, wakaranai. And walked away. Walked away, gave up. Wakaranai, and walked away. Right? The English teacher at the juku. So that sort of explains it too, doesn't it? So that's another reason we always say, learn Japanese from a Japanese person, because we've seen the result of learning English from a non-English speaker. You know, what the results of that are. So that's why we always say, if you want to learn Japanese, learn it from a Japanese person. Certainly not from an Australian. Konnichiwa. Konnichiwa, everybody. Konnichiwa, minasan. Anyway, there it was. More videos coming soon.